Take a look at this, a single letter, and that letter is A. Now what do you see when you look at it? Well, maybe you think of an apple, or perhaps you think of Adam, or it could be that you just see it as a simple symbol. But the instant you start to think of anything beyond its physical shape, at that very moment you've already stepped into the realm of meaning. You're no longer just looking at a curve with a line. Instead, you're seeing aspects of your own world reflected in it. Now, let's move on and watch this. What exactly is this number 1? Is it a count of something? Could it represent a pencil, maybe because of its shape? Or is it the first step in a sequence? In the field of physics, it could even be thought of as a particle. But to me, this simple one is like an entire universe. So, what has changed? Well, you have changed in the way you perceive it, and the context around it has changed too. And here's an important thing to remember. You'll never be able to see that one or A again in the exact same way as you did the first time. They've come alive now, filled with meaning, memories, and potential. What gave these symbols life wasn't their physical shape, it was their relationships with other things. It was their ability to stand for or represent something else, which is what we mean by having meaning. In the relational web theory, this ability to create meaning and act as a constraint lives within a concept we call phi. Phi isn't just a regular function. It's an ever-evolving space of rules that determines what is important and significant. For example, it links the letter A to the concept of an apple, and the number 1 to ideas like unity, motion, and existence. Your heart beats, and it does so through chemical and mechanical processes. But it also speeds up when you see someone you love. That right there is the concept of phi at work. It's like a web that weaves together interpretation, memory, emotion, and biology, all intertwined with one another. Let's talk about a concept in the relational web theory. We have something called the relational web, which we represent as W. And W is made up of 3 parts, V, E, and phi. V stands for relational points. These are not actual entities, but rather points that represent relationships. E stands for connective links, which we can think of as the flows of context between those points. And phi is a mapping. It takes the pair of V and E and transforms them into a new version of V and E, evolving the structure of the relational web. Now, let's introduce something called semantic closure. We define a mapping where phi takes the pair of V and E and maps them to a set we call sign of V and E. This set, sign of V and E, is a collection of interpreted configurations that are under internal constraints. It's not about external control, it's about internal laws that govern how things work. Just like Patty said, control is not chemical, it is semiotic. Living things don't just passively follow rules, they actively create the rules that govern their existence. They have the ability to repair themselves when damaged, and they evolve their own unique logic over time. This idea is known as autopoiesis, which was an insight from Maturana and Varela. It means that life is self-producing and is operationally closed, meaning it can maintain and reproduce itself within its own system. In the relational web theory, phi doesn't just act upon the pair of V and E. The pair of V and E also shapes phi in return. Think about a wound healing. The skin grows back because the body system has the knowledge of itself. It's not following a single central script. Instead, it's based on local rules that interact with one another on a global scale. We define something called coevolution. First, we say that at a certain time step t, phi at time t takes the pair of V at time t and E at time t and maps them to a new pair of V at time t plus 1 and E at time t plus 1. Then, we say that the new pair of V at time t plus 1 and E at time t plus 1 satisfies the conditions set by phi at time t plus 1. The symbol that we use to denote this satisfaction is a bit like a double turnstile. And what this means is that phi is both a model that describes how things work and an interpreter of its own history. The system is able to sustain itself because its operational grammar, which is the way it operates and functions, is recursive. That is, phi and the pair of v and e have a reciprocal relationship with each other. Life doesn't come into being in a state of stillness. It requires tension, differences, and a flow of energy. Prigogine taught us that systems that are far from a state of equilibrium have the ability to organize themselves. They do this by exporting entropy, which is a measure of disorder. In the relational web theory, this isn't just about heat energy. It's about something called relational tension. It's about how the imbalance within the web of relationships can fuel the creation of new patterns. Think about a tree bending towards the light, or worms moving around in the soil after it rains. Even you as a person adapt to experiences like love, pain, and loss. All of these examples show energy at work within relationships, and it's not about being in a state of equilibrium. We define something called relational density. We use the symbol rho of V to measure the degree of connected variation at a particular point V. Then we define something called local fluctuation, which we represent as the change in phi. The change in phi is calculated as the partial derivative of phi with respect to the relational density rho. When the change in phi is high, it means that the structure is unstable. When the change in phi is low, it means that there is something called semiotic closure. Dissipative adaptation occurs when the sum for all points v of the product of the change in phi at point v and the value of e at point v tends towards a minimum value. What this means is that the web of relationships reorganizes itself to reduce the internal relational turbulence or disorder. Now we can see the three-part architecture of living behavior within the relational web. 1. The semantic layer, which is represented by phi. This layer is about making meaning, recognizing patterns, and creating norms. This helps us understand why a molecule can mean something in a certain context. 2. The operational layer, which is the relationship between V, E, and phi. This layer is about self-production, adaptation, and recursion. It explains why the system is able to persist and change its form over time. 3. The energetic layer, which involves the change in phi and the tension flows. This layer sees relational disequilibrium as a creative force. It helps us understand why fluctuations can lead to the generation of complexity. Together, these three layers create a living, evolving web. It's not like a mechanical machine, and it's not pure chaos either. Instead, it's a cosmos of interpretation, where everything is interconnected and meaningful. Every letter you read, every single one, every number you write down, and every cell in your body. All of these are filled with relationships and are alive in a sense. Meaning isn't something that comes after matter. Meaning is an inherent part of matter when it exists in relation to other things. And life occurs when those relationships turn back on themselves. They shape, they make us feel, they help us remember, and they allow us to know. This is the relational web theory. It describes a world where form, meaning, and energy are not separate entities.